Okay, dear students, welcome to my class. And I think you can see the screen now. And today, the topic of my discussion is the theory of translation given by Jacques Derrida. I think you know Jacques Derrida. At the very inception, I will give you some ideas about this very great philosopher and theorist. Jacques Derrida. I think you see this photo. Derrida is in meditative mood, very speculative mood. His thinking was probably something that we can't. Derrida was born in 1930. And he was born in Algeria, which was at that time a French colony. And he died in 2004 in Paris. You know, Paris is the capital of France. He was one of the most influential philosophers of 20th century. And he critiques Western philosophy. And he has reinterpreted the nature of language, writing, and meaning. Actually, he brought about a kind of revolutionary changes in the attitude of the people towards these very aspects of epistemology, that is philosophy, language, nature of language, writing, or even the meaning. So for millenniums, we have some stereotyped ideas about language. We have some hard and fast conceptions of language, of meanings, of philosophy also. But Jacques Derrida deconstructed all our perceptions and conceptions in these very fields, that is field of philosophy, field of language, field of writing, field of meanings. So what we thought, he did not think. He thought quite opposite, or quite different from what we usually thought in 20th century. And he termed it deconstruction. We know construction. We also know reconstruction. But a very significant term that we hear from him is deconstruction. Deconstruction is a kind of breaking into pieces. This is not destruction. This is breaking into pieces, splitting up into pieces. So why did he split up all our concepts regarding language, meanings, writings? Why did he split up all these things into pieces? To reconstruct. So he reconstructed all these aspects in a different way. And here lies his specialty. before Derrida, we had some very traditional attitudes towards our language, towards meanings, towards writings. For example, we thought that meanings are constant. We also thought that meanings are inherent properties of language. But Jacques Derrida brought about some significant changes in our that kind of attitude towards meanings or towards language. But one thing you must not forget, that Derrida was not a detached philosopher from his time. Actually, he inherited the germs of his thinking from his predecessors like the structuralists, linguists. For example, I just like to mention the name Ferdinand de Saussure, one of the leading exponents of linguistics or linguistic theories. Then he was also influenced by some formalist philosophers from Russia. For example, Mikhail Bakhtin, his concept of defamiliarization, dialogism, and polyphony. So these are very popular terms introduced by the philosophers whom I have mentioned, Mikhail Bakhtin and Ferdinand de Saussure. And if you think of Michel Foucault, one of the contemporaries of Jacques Derrida, and many other philosophers, for example, Frantz Fanon. So many thinkers of 20th century contributed immensely to Jacques Derrida's thoughts, Jacques Derrida's ideas. Okay. So Jacques Derrida, in this way, brought about some revolutionary changes in our attitudes towards language, towards meanings. Derrida says that meanings are not constant, or meanings are not the inherent properties of language. That we also hear from Ferdinand de Saussure, who said that meanings are arbitrary. Meanings are very arbitrary. There is a meaning that you celebrate today may not sustain its same flavor, today's flavor tomorrow. It may change tomorrow. And it may again change the day after tomorrow. So meanings always keep changing. So Derrida's deconstruction theory became very popular in 20th century, especially in the second half of 20th century. And I think you must have heard the name of Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Spivak was one of the students of Derrida. And she translated Derrida's book, Grammatology, into English from French language. And she made this book very, very popular. So Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, who is still alive and who is one of the seminal post-colonial thinkers and one of the key personalities in subaltern studies, has made Jacques Derrida's concepts of language, meanings, or his concept of deconstruction very popular. all over the world through translation. So Derrida has reached us through translation. Now, what does Derrida say about translation? Does he think that translation is necessary? Does he think that translation is essential? Or does he think that translation is possible? Now, what does he say about translation? Actually, we will answer to this question today in our today's lecture. I do not like to call it a lecture. I just like to call it a discussion, because I will speak, you will listen to me. You will also speak, I will listen to you. And if you have any question or query, just let me know. I will try my best to answer to your questions and simplify the points that I will discuss today. So Jacques Derrida's translation theory. Derrida's translation theory is deeply intertwined with his philosophy of deconstruction. So at first, try to know deconstruction. What is deconstruction? I have already told you the meaning of deconstruction. Deconstruction means split up, cut into pieces. Mincing, you may call it mincing. In Bangla, kima banan. Just cut into pieces, cut into pieces, cut into pieces. So why? Not for destruction, but for reconstruction. This is the difference. So deconstruction does not mean destruction, remember. Deconstruction is essential for reconstruction. Suppose you have your old building and you want to construct a new building at the same place. So what should you do? At first, you have to destroy your old building, and then you will start the construction of a new building. So deconstruction is essential for reconstruction. So why is deconstruction essential for reconstruction? Okay, why is reconstruction essential? It's a very natural question which visits our mind. Why is reconstruction essential? Reconstruction is essential because every theory or every concept, every philosophy or every practice in course of time turns into a hegemonic force, turns into an authoritarian force. Every text, if you do not question a text, that very text in course of time may control you. It will control you. It will be controlled, guided. It will be constructed by that very text. And at the same, similarly, if you practice a spatial behavior for millenniums or for hundreds of years, in course of time, that very practice may turn into an adamantine rule that may control you, that may decide your behavior, that may also decide your practices, that may also decide your attitudes, your ways of interpretations. So every text, every practice, every concept, every philosophy may have the chances to be transformed into a hegemonic practice, a hegemonic concept, or a hegemonic philosophy. And if a practice turns into a hegemonic practice, then it may stop innovations. It may discourage recreations. It may discourage progress, or it may stop any kind of modifications. But human beings need changes. Human beings need modifications. Human beings need innovations. If you do not change yourself over time, you cannot go ahead. You have to change yourself with the time. Now you are, for example, you are 23 or 24. So you have your thought process. You have your attitudes. But while you will be 40, if you think like 24, you must lag behind. At 40, you have to think like 40. At 24, you have to think like 24. If at 24, if you think like 12 or 10, then the people would call you immature. And at 40, if you think like a man of 24 or a woman of 24, then the people may call you audacious fools. So you have to change. So how will you change? You have to deconstruct your past. You have to deconstruct your past texts. You have to deconstruct your past behavior, your past philosophy, your past meanings. Then you can reconstruct your required meanings, your required philosophers for the future. So changes are the demands of the day. And for changes, you must deconstruct. So deconstruction is a very essential process which is required for reconstruction. And that's why Derrida proposes this deconstruction philosophy. And with this deconstruction philosophy, you can question your texts. You can question your history. Your history is a text, so you can question your history. Your myths are your texts. You can question your myths. You can deconstruct your myths. Or the stories that you hear from your grandmother or grandfather, or your grandmother's mother, or grandfather's father, that is great-grandfather, great-grandmother. These stories have been continuing their hegemony for millenniums. Now you have to question, you have to reinterpret those stories. You must not interpret a story as your father interpreted it, or as your grandfather interpreted it. You have to interpret this story in a different way. That is also a kind of deconstruction. That is, you are approaching a text in a different way. Not always positively, but negatively, you may also approach, and that is welcoming. That is also welcoming. So Derrida says that translation is possible, and at the same time, translation is impossible. And he views translation not as a simple reproduction of meaning, but as a transformative, often impossible. So translation is not only transformation of meanings or transformation of languages. Suppose you were translating an English text into Bengali. So you were changing or transforming the language. Derrida is not a person who is ready to call it a translation process. A translation process is far, far complicated. And that's why he has said that translation is often impossible. If it is impossible, then isn't it necessary? Derrida says that, yes, though translation is impossible, it's essential. So just think of the paradox. Just think of the paradox. That is, he says that translation is impossible. And at the same time, he says that, okay, we need translation. So how is it possible? If it is impossible, then how should we translate? So it's a paradox. I will answer to this paradox soon in course of my discussion. And he has also argued that because meaning is never fixed, so meaning is always changing. So what is meaning? Meaning is the effect of a word, remember. Meaning is the effect of a word. Suppose you pronounce a word horse, H-O-R-S-E. So after hearing this word, what effect does this word have on you? It makes you think of an animal. It makes you think of an animal. Okay? It makes you think of an animal. So, and you define that animal with this very word, horse. So in this way, we find that meaning is not the exact synonymous word, or meaning is not the exact definition. Meaning is the effect or the impact that it creates on your mind. Now, the impact that a word creates on you may not be able to create the same impact on the next generation, that is after 25 years. It may not create the same effect or same impact on the next generation. Or the same impact may not be created on the next after next generation by the same word or same meaning. And that's why Derrida says that meanings always keep changing. Meanings are never constant. And there are two important incidents which always keep occurring in the meaning construction process. Two important incidents which keep occurring, happening during the meaning construction process. Now, what are these two important events? Number one, difference. And number two, deferment or defer, D-E-F-E-R. Defer means a stop. And difference means variant, not same. So difference and deferment, D-E-F-E-R-M-E-N-T, or D-E-F-E-R, defer. So defer means a stop. And differ, D-I-F-F-E-R, differ means to be different. So Derrida combines these two words, differ and defer. D-I-F-F-E-R, differ means not same or differentiate. And differ, D-E-F-E-R, differ means stop. So he brings these two words together and make this word. Difference. Difference, not difference, difference. He has constructed this word deliberately. Never think that it's a mistake. Derrida does it deliberately. Actually, this very word is constructed by two words, differ and differ. That is difference and different. That is, while you are deriving the meaning from a word, it becomes different from what it was before. So this very difference creates a kind of obstructions, confusion. The meanings that your father derived are not working on you. You are constructing new meanings. Or the meanings that your father derived from a word when not working with your grandfather. And one thing that you must not forget, that meaning means the impact of the word, the effect of the word, how a word makes you think, how a word makes you work, how a word makes your cognitive process be active. Remember, this is meaning. So meanings always change. That's why translation is impossible. Because the text that you are translating has got its own meaning. Now, suppose you are translating Shakespeare's Macbeth. During the time of Shakespeare, that very text had its meaning because it had its own impact on the audience. Now, after 500 years, it is creating a new impact on the new generations. It is not creating the same impact that it created 500 years ago. That's why there are differences. And these differences make us stop and think, stop and think, stop and think. This is called differ, D-E-F-E-R. It stops us. It makes us think. It makes us think of the difference. And that's why Derrida says that while we are constructing meanings, these two important incidents happen. One is difference, and the other is deferment. That is differ, differ, and differ. D-I-F-F-E-R and D-E-F-E-R, differ. Differ means stop, and differ means to be, to make different. As these two processes go on, as the meanings are not constant, language is unstable. Derrida says that language is unstable. So just think of the word unstable. We may say, hey, language is not same or language is different, but he calls it unstable. The language that my grandfather spoke, I do not speak the language of my grandfather. Even of my father, I speak my language. And my children will not speak my language. They will have their own vocabulary with new impact, new effect. And my grandchildren will speak a different language with different effect and impacts. So language is quite unstable. It's never stable. And that's why translation is a regulated transformation. Regulated, you have to regulate. Regulated transformation that keeps a text alive while altering it. As you know from translation theory, that translation always alters a text. The text that you translate is not same as the target text, because there is always something missing in translation. You add something to a target text, and you also miss something from the source text. So a translation is a transformation. But this transformation process should be regulated. You must not take it casually, or you must not take it carelessly. You have to take it very sagaciously, and you have to try it with your 100% dexterity, skill. Otherwise, the whole process may be misleading or misguiding. Now, look at this slide. The impossibility and necessity of translation. I have already told you about the impossibility and necessity of translation. So why is translation impossible? If I ask you, the very simple answer is that as the meanings are arbitrary, as the meanings change, as there is always difference and deformment in the process of construction, in the process of construction of language, construction of meanings. So translation is impossible. But we need translation because in our today's world, there are more than 7,000 languages. I think you know it. It's not possible for a single person to know all these languages. So we need translation. Translation is a gateway to multiculturalism. Translation is a gateway to multilingualism. Translation is a gateway to the epistemology of diverse nations and diverse communities. I think you know it very well. So translation is essential. So translation is impossible, and at the same time, it's a necessity that you have already heard that translation is itself a bridge language. We can have a gateway to enter into the world epistemology. So translation is essential, but at the same time, the paradox is that translation is impossible because the meanings always keep changing. That Derrida has already said. And just look at this, that impossibility of pure translation capturing the exact meaning of a text is impossible because words are always in part untranslatable. I think you know two terms, translatability and untranslatability. And you will find these two terms while reading Gayatri Chakrabarti's Vivek, that is Derrida's student. Untranslatability means there are some words in the source text that you can't exactly translate into target language, because every word has got a specific connotation. Every word has got its very close or intimate attachment with the context. And every text is closely associated to co-text or the context. And it is really difficult, very, very difficult to estimate all these things during the translation process. So there are some terms, terminologies, or some words in source text that cannot be translated into target language. That is called untranslatability. And there are many words that we can translate easily or transform from one language to another language, and we call it translatability. So Derrida views translation as essential, that is necessary. It is necessary. It's inevitable. And translation is also essential for survival of a text. For example, you have read Oedipus Rex by Sophocles, and you have read it in English. And many of you think that Sophocles wrote in English. Many of you, not all of you, okay? So why do you think so? Because you haven't seen the manuscript, the original text of Oedipus Rex in original language, that is Greek language. So you are reading Oedipus Rex in English and you have started thinking that it is written in English originally, but not. So just think that the English version of Oedipus Rex is a new text. It has given life to the original text. It's not possible for me to know all the languages of the world. I do not know Greek language, but I can taste Sophocles through translation. So translation gives new life to a text. I suppose you have read Ramayana or Mahabharata. In which language? In Bengali, not in Sanskrit language. We do not know Sanskrit language, but we know Bangla, and we have read it in translation. So translation always lends a new life to a text, and that's why translation is essential. So translation is necessary because it gives new life to a text, and translation is impossible because there are untranslatabilities in a text. Now, in this slide, I think it will wonder. It will wonder at a new term that is logocentric or logocentrism. The conception of logocentrism is important because deconstruction is quite opposite to logocentrism. Logos, if you go back to the origin of this word, if you go back to the Greeks, you will find that logos means the words of God, God's words. And logocentrism means while you are surrendering, you are centering, you are focusing, you are 100% loyal to those words. That is called logocentrism. For example, your belief system. A Muslim believes that the Quran is unchangeable. So this is logocentrism. That is, it was centered on these logos. A Christian may believe that his Bible is unchangeable. So Bible is logos, and loyalty to the Bible is logocentrism. A Hindu may think that Vedas or Ved is unchangeable. So he is loyal to Vedas. So this loyalty to Vedas is also logocentrism. And there are so many logos in our society. For example, you may think that, oh, that very day is my lucky day. So this belief is also your logocentric belief. You think, oh, Sunday is my lucky day and Tuesday is my unlucky day. You may think it. You may think, many people think like this. Okay, so this is also logocentrism. Okay. So traditionally, translation is seen as a transfer of stable, universal meaning from one language to another. That is source language to target language. This is a logocentric ideal about translation. Before Derrida, it was a very common belief that a job of a translator is to change the language only. It is not the job of a translator to change the meaning of the text. That is called logocentric. That is, you have to be loyal to the meanings of the language, source language. The language may change, but the meanings will remain intact. That is called logocentrism. So there was a logocentric attitude towards translation. It was a traditional attitude towards translation, that translation is only a transformation of language, but the meanings will remain the same or stable. That was a traditional attitude towards translation, which Derrida challenges. Derrida actually does not support the logocentric ideal of translation. He rather deconstructs, he rather challenges this very traditional ideal of translation. And why? Because he says that meanings are not stable. Meaning is not transcendent. It is language dependent. Derrida says that as language is unstable, meaning is unstable. Language changes, meaning changes. Situation changes, meaning changes. Context changes, meaning changes. Even speaker changes, meaning changes. Or even listener changes, meaning changes. Let me give you an example. Suppose the word mama, Bangla word mama. While you use this word to address your mother's brother, mama, he becomes very happy. He calls you, okay, Bhagne, you are my beloved Bhagne, and you call him beloved mama. But while you use the same word to address your MLSS in your university, he does never think that he is your mother's brother. And you do never mean that he is your mother's brother. So just think, the same word, the person changes, the speaker is the same, you are the speaker, as the person, that is the listener changes, the meaning changes. That very mama, that you impose upon an MLSS of your university, that mama is not equivalent to your mother's brother. So just think how this word, the same word, but the meaning changes as the situation changes, as the listener changes. So meanings are never constant, remember. And that's why Derrida says that translation must not be logocentric, or the ideal of translation should not be logocentric, because language is unstable, meaning is also unstable. So Derrida is in favor of deconstruction. So how does this deconstruction process works? Deconstructing original or translation and binary, the original myth. So how does this deconstruction work? We assume an original text as pure and self-contained. For example, you are translating a text. So you assume it, you consider it as pure and self-contained. You would think that, oh, this text is independent. Okay. But Derrida is quite opposite to your traditional concept. He says that no, original text itself is a translation. So how? Suppose at first you think and then you write. So your thinking means your lang, L-A-N-G-U-E, lang is working there. That is, idea formation process is there inside your brain. And while you are using a pen to write, you are using paper to write, it becomes quite, or it may become different in many ways from what you think. You cannot write exactly what you think. Okay. So there is always a deviation. This is called difference. Okay. It is different from what you think. Your writing is different from what you think. That is, lang is different from parole. Parole is different from lang. Parole means what you speak, what you say. That is parole, verbal delivery. And lang means what is working inside your thought process or cognitive process. These two are different. Okay. So Derrida says that a text is already a translation. I think you have got this point. And he has added another point to this very particular saying, that is, it is a repetition of previous linguistic traces. Suppose you are writing a book. You must not think that it is accidental, or you must not think that it is a German text. German means which is unadulterated, which is free from intertextuality or intersectionality. No. Whatever you write, you have derived from your predecessors. Many of your ancestors are there. Suppose you are writing a poem. You have read Nazrul, you have read Tagore, you have read Rimbaud, you have read Baudelaire, you have read Shelley, Byron, Keats. So all these writers are in your writing. So your writing is a repetition in this sense, repetition of previous linguistic traces. So never think that the translation, the text that you produce is a genuine or unadulterated text, unravished text. And that's why Derrida says that a text is already a translation. So while you are translating, or while you are deconstructing, translation is a kind of deconstruction process because you are creating new meanings. So the concept of original is a myth. Never think that it is original. Never call it, oh, I am original, or this text is original, or this fiction is original. No. Original, this very term, is a myth. So why? Because there is intersectionality of many things in your text. So original is a myth. The hierarchy between the original, that is privileged, and the translation, that is secondary, that is source text, and the target text is destabilized. Even the relationship, just think, relationship between the source text and the target text is destabilized. It is not constant. It always keeps changing. It is never constant. And both are part of continuous process of linguistic transformation. So while you are going on with translation process, you will find that there is a consistent and continuous process of transformation. One language is transformed into other language. One meaning is transformed into other meaning. One context is transformed into other context. One reader is transformed into other reader. So there is always a transformative process in translation process. Then now come to the keyword difference that I have already told you. Now you may question, why do I come back to this word now at this very point of my discussion? While we say that translation is a very arbitrary process, language is an unstable means of communication, or even meanings are also unstable, or original, quote unquote, is a myth, or the source text itself is a translation. So lots of confusing things you hear. Now we have to solve these confusions with a single word. What's that word? Difference. Meaning is never fully present. It is always deferred. Deferred, just look at the word deferred, D-E-F-E-R-R-E-D. Deferred means stopped, or put off, give up. And differentiated means different. You should make separate or different one thing from other thing. So deferred, defer, and differ. Two words come together in difference. And these two processes, deferment and difference, work through a chain of signifiers. Signifiers means words, okay? Words. It is a linguistic term, signifier. Signifier, signified, signification. Signifier is the word, for example, book or mobile phone. It is signifier. Mobile phone, this word is signifier. And signified, when I show you this very particular object, this is signified. That is meaning. So another term that is a sign of word must be repeatable in different contexts to have meaning. The same word you may use in different situations with different meanings. The same word. And each repetition changes the context slightly. That I have already mentioned. Suppose the word mama that you use to address your mother's brother has got a meaning, and the meaning changes while you use the same word to address the MLSs of your university. The same word, but the meaning changes. So context changes, meaning changes. There is no singular meaning of a word. And a translation acts as a supplement. It is both an addition to the original. So translation is not the exact copy of the source text. Derrida has called it a supplement. It is not an exact text, exact copy. You can never call a translation equivalent to the source text. It's only a supplement. Derrida says, why? Because this translation has come to you through the unstable process of linguistic evolution. And to help it survive, that is, translation helps the original text, that is the source text, not original, source text. It helps the source text survive. And a replacement that exposes the lack of perfection in the original. So translation is always imperfect because it is a kind of deviation from the source text. So now at this very point, we are towards the end of our discussion. So at this very point, a paradox comes to our mind. Then is translation necessary if it is impossible? I think you have got the answer to this question. Yes, translation is impossible, but it is necessary. And Derrida suggests moving away from translation, that is implying a static transfer, toward regulated transformation. That is, translation is not static, rather transformative, but it is regulated. You must not take it carelessly or casually. And not only that, while you are involved in this process, while you are engaged in this process, then you encounter some specific obstructions. For example, resistance. It is the proper names often resist translation. They cannot be simply swapped for an equivalent. That is untranslatability. There are some words in a source language that you may not find in your target language. Your target language may not have the capacity to hold the complete and authentic meaning or credible meaning of the source language. That is called untranslatability. And it is difficult, or it is a kind of resistance to proper translation. So the resistance of the proper name represents the fundamental resistance of all texts of being fully captured by another language. So resistance means untranslatability. The word that you hear from Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, Derrida calls it resistance. So this resistance is a kind of obstruction that helps, that hinders you to understand or capture the source text or the source language fully. And this resistance is exactly what makes translation both urgent and infinitely difficult. As there are untranslatabilities in the source language, translation is never 100% authentic. It will never claim 100% credibility of a translation. Then how can we make translation credible, at least minimum credible, to the readers? What ethical stance should a translator sustain or should hold during this translation process? Translation is an act of welcoming the other, that is the foreign language. You are translating a foreign language into your language, so you are welcoming a foreign language. And what is translator's burden? The translator must balance that duty. That is, while you are translating a text, it will always be in betweenness. How would you make a balance between two different languages that have come to you through unstable evolutionary process? So it's a difficult task. It is called translator's burden. So ultimately, we know that it is a difficult job to bring about balance, but we have to do our job of translation with 100% dedication. And how can we do it? Translation is not about finding the right word. It is a continuous task. The text that you translate today, if it is translated by some other persons after 5 years or after 25 years, it will be a different text. So translation is a continuous process. It is not a close-ended process. It's an open-ended process. So translation is the chance for philosophy to continue. It keeps the question of meaning open rather than closing it down. This is translation, actually. It is not close-ended. It is open-ended. So this is all about my discussion today. And now I like to hear you. If you have any query, if you have any review or comment, please, you may interact with me now. You may interact with me now. If you have any question, you may please ask me. Or if you want to make a comment, please, you are welcome. Or if you want to review, please, you are welcome, please. I like to hear you. And I hope that our discussion should be interactive.